Very, very quickly, just so that everyone's on the same page-ish, what female genital cutting and circumcision and mutilation is, 3 different terms being bandied around the world, and what term you use normally situates you as to where you come at the challenge from. Now, who's going to be talking to that? Joy, you'll be talking about the physical elements, so you'll be looking at type 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So I'm not going to spend time on that. Just to get us oriented that there's at least 27 countries in which FGM is practiced historically, and now, of course, there are more countries in which it's being practiced because of diasporic migratory movement. But, so for the UK, we have FGM being practiced here. We know this. And that's why the new legislation has come in over the last decade or two. You know, in 27 African countries, some people aren't quite aware that actually some of the Middle East countries are caught up in this, and you need to keep your antennae open on that. And Pakistan, although not ubiquitously at all, but some small ethnic groups inside Pakistan do still practice. So just to get you your antennae alert there. I'm just going to do a quick glance at its history, because it's quite interesting that. And actually, it's currently illegal in most countries that it's practiced in. So don't think that, you know, the UK is vanguarding away, leading in a colonial sort of movement, the rush towards human rights. This legislation against FGM has been in place in many African countries for over a decade or so because of UN pressure, because they've matched it with development funding. So, and that's caused some issues as well in terms of how the local populations have absorbed this, whether it's an external movement or something coming from within the community. And I just thought we'd start visually by situating ourselves into some of the groups where this is current. These are young Senegalese women, girls, who are on a zero tolerance campaign that is NGO based but also has IGO. When I say IGO, international governmental organisation, support and funding for their work. Now internationally, the WHO reckons that there's 125 million women in Africa who have experienced FGM. That's a big community to be moving into and trying to work with. Lots of insiders there. And here in the UK, we have something estimated 20, 25, 30,000 at risk. Now, this is something that requires a seminar all of its own about how those stats are brought together. But we know we're into several thousand at risk. So it's a live issue, not just here in London, but in any city or area where, and it's mainly cities, where diasporic African and Middle Eastern communities where it's practiced have their communities gathered. Okay. We've got a range of agencies here in the room, and you'll be able to find yourselves on that little chart, either NHS or policing, education, and community representatives, or representatives of communities. We're going to have some personal testimony, Sari, from yourself. Thank you very much indeed. That's always very important to try and ground what this means personally. But we have Joy here because it's important. We have health representatives here because the impacts of FGM on a girl's health or a baby's health, right through to, you know, post-menopausal impacts. Every stage of life is potentially critically impacted by FGM, which is why, first reason why health is so important, second reason why WHO took the leadership in this about 5 decades ago, to say this is a health issue, and that's how we're going to approach it internationally. We'll take it away from the cultural, we'll take it away from any human rights discourse, we'll take it away from post-colonial speak, and we'll just go in with a health discourse. And that actually will be the case here in the UK too. As I go through this presentation, I will show you how for practicing communities where this is being practiced, and for those families where the mother has been circumcised, if she is able to start making the connections between the health impacts for herself, or her sister, or her auntie, or her cousin who has been cut, and what that is connected to the FGM practice, and for her child, you have a better chance, actually, we have a better chance in the UK of starting to turn the Titanic around. Because cultural change is like turning the Titanic when it's hit an iceberg and it's cut itself right across all the engine rooms. Okay, keep that in mind. This is not a light little, Scooby thing on Brighton Pier, right? It's a big tanker or a big ocean liner that we're seeking to make some changes to. And you have a legal framework. Education, terribly important, but not the sole mover and shaker, I'm afraid. Everybody has got a role to play, because this is a complex thing, changing culture and enabling people within practicing communities to feel safe, strong enough, connected enough, empowered sufficiently, and sufficiently believing the wider framework to move, to take a risky move and move the practice for the next generation. Here's the prevalence chart. Most of you will be aware of that one. It's from the UNFPA, UNICEF report on FGM. Oh, by the way, don't follow too slavishly the notes, because I just gave you a sort of, this is the sort of area that I'll be talking about, but I did some further work on it to stage it for you. But here's the prevalence chart. And what's very interesting here, I think, is the prevalence in the northern section of Africa, but don't be fooled, because it does go further down into DRC Congo. In fact, you can find incidents in southern Africa too, but mainly of type 4. The more highly invasive forms of cutting and mutilation occur in the top section there in Africa. And also have a little look at the percentage prevalence. So Somalia, if you have a Somalian population in your community, they have a much higher incidence, prevalence of FGM going on inside the community than, say, a Ugandan population, where it's highly ethnically reduced now in terms of its incidence. And it's really important, actually, I'm going to speak to our white European constituency here, just to say, because some of you mightn't have spent time doing African studies, I don't know how much exposure you have to different African communities, but do not be foxed. If you've got sub-Saharan African discourse going in your head, it's simply not sufficient. African communities are highly diverse. The reasoning why FGM is supported is pretty diverse too, across different regions and ethnicities, and we can discuss that later between ourselves. But nuance is important. Just like you wouldn't talk about Scottish nationalism in the same way with somebody from Glasgow, right, and expect the same response as somebody from London. I think that gets it for you. So here we are, FGM in UK today. There is, in terms of the sort of mapping that's going on, there is a body of work which is using prevalence methodology. I don't think it's sufficient. What it's doing, prevalence methodology goes, if it's this percentage in country of origin, it's going to be this percentage here in the UK, and therefore we can estimate numbers of babies, girls at risk. I think it's slightly more complicated than that. Haven't got time to discuss that with you at the moment, but if you're going into a mapping exercise, any one of you and your regions and your organisations, do get in conversation with me later.